Very timely itong topic natin, no, because of the unpredictable weather, climate variability, and yung extreme weather events, no, kung tawagin natin. Even I was not spared by the tropical storm Christine. So thank you for joining this session live, and greetings na rin to those who will be watching the recorded version. So I would like to acknowledge then the presence of our DLUP chair, Sir Remzi. Unfortunately, my co-FIC, Sir Milben, will not be able to attend. Badly hit yung subdivision nila sa Bae, Laguna. So this is P203 class. We are already in week 6 no? But I would like to revisit a key topic from week 4. One that deserves to be highlighted whenever we talk about land use planning, especially given the extreme weather events that we are facing even as we speak. So today we will be talking about climate and disaster risk assessment, or what we call CIDRA. Some of you may already know about it, while for others this could be new. But whether you are familiar with it or just starting out, today's presentation should be a good head start or a refresher, whichever may be applicable to you. But before we dig into the technical part of CIDRA, I would like to begin by sharing with you a photograph from Dr. Ambet Ocampo. Shows a familiar scene in the Philippines. This is a post-disaster event in 1899. Stating the obvious, everything appears to be devastated. No? Looking at the type of materials used in the housing structures, we can understand bakit wasak yung mga bahay. Especially nga considering that houses were made of light materials. But 100 years later, we are confronted with the same familiar scene. This is also after the event of a super typhoon. So we can argue that unlike in 1899, our structures should have been way better, not in 2030 compared to 100 years ago. But why does the destruction look similar? Professor Ambet poses a very intriguing and interesting question. Since arguably yung structures before were not as durable then as they are now, he asks, are storms becoming stronger? Hindi natin to kailangan sagutin because I think may mga bagay na hindi na natin kailangan idaan sa debate. Totoo nga ba yung climate change o hindi? Basta ang sigurado tayo, merong kakaiba, merong mali. And when we are wondering whether typhoons are getting stronger, pag sinabi natin stronger, it's a comparative word, which means we have something to compare with personal experiences. We can also learn from other people's experiences. Kaya nga madalas nating marinig yung linyahan na ngayon lang. No? Sa tinagal-tagal ko na nakatira rito, ngayon ko lang naranasan ito, maraming nagugulat, maraming nagtataka, maraming nagkukumpara sa personal experiences nila. And even right now, Bicol region has experienced the worst flooding in recent history. At hindi lang actually dito sa atin, hindi lang dito sa Pilipinas, even as we speak, nangyayari rin siya kahit sa mga mayayamang bansa sa mundo, no? Kagaya nitong bagyo sa US, nitong nakaraan lang. So ang keyword dito ay never seen anything like it. Maybe sa ibang bansa, this could be totally new. Pero tayo bilang Pilipino, we can admit na part na ng reality natin at existence yung mga calamity. Kaya nga, madalas nating makita na magsilabasan sa social media yung mga ganito. Para sa ilan, siya ay optimistic na pananaw, pero para sa ilan naman, parang ano siya, parang toxic positivity. Kasi nga, kakaiba tayo ng sitwasyon. Sabi nga nila, we are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. Pero pag-usapan natin itong word na sanay na. Sabi niya, sanay na raw sila sa baha, pero baka nga kasi sanay na sila, kaya wala na silang binabago. Maybe isa rin sa mga weaknesses ng mga Pilipino, yung madali tayong magpatawad, madali tayong makalimot. And in the case of calamities, kapag kumalma na yung lahat, kaliwat kanan na naman no, yung mga posts about Filipino resiliency. Nothing can break the Filipino spirit. Filipinos are the happiest people on earth despite the calamities. Well, in reality, kahit nasa DNA ng Pilipino yung resiliency, it should not be a permanent coping mechanism. Kaya nga, instead of really perpetuating the idea that Filipinos should endure or magtiis. What we need is a systemic change, better governance, and support so that people don't have to bounce back so frequently. Instead, we are shifting the conversation from resiliency to preparedness, to risk management, and reducing vulnerability. And it's a very good thing na part na ng conversation at governance natin yung climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction na kailangan talaga natin itong pag-usapan kahit walang batas na nagre-require sa atin. And it's also good na merong batas na nagko-compare sa atin na pag-usapan yung climate change adaptation at disaster risk reduction. And this is why we are here to talk about SIDRA. And to simplify, we can break it actually into two components. First, we have the climate risk assessment. And second, we have the disaster risk assessment. Ano ba pag sinabing risk? Pag sinabi nating risk, ito ay merong emphasis sa expected losses na kagagawan ng isang hazard. When we say loss, it's the things that matter to us, no? Yung buhay natin, yung hanap buhay natin, yung kabuhayan, yung pinagkukunan natin ng kinabubuhay. And there is also the time element. May mga hazards na nangyayari palagi, meron naman na talagang sobrang unpredictable. Some hazards are part of our lives, some can be totally eliminated. But if there's anything that you can take away from this lecture, please make it this. Risk is not hazard. Risk is not exposure to hazard. Risk is actually a complex term that considers vulnerability, likelihood of occurrence, severity of consequence. That also considers yung adaptive capacity, yung sensitivity. So before we can arrive sa term na risk, mahabang-mahaba na yung analysis na nagawa natin. So going back, yung SIDRA natin merong dalawang parts. We have climate and we have disaster risk assessment. So we can break it down further into two types of deliverables. Pag sinabing climate risk assessment, meron tayong climate projections at climate impact chain. Pag sinabi naman nating disaster risk assessment, dito na natin pang terms like sensitivity, adaptive capacity, vulnerability, and so on. So before anything else, just to provide a foundation or basis. So we have at least two motivations. Una, we need to do SIDRA because ito yung tamang gawin. Secondly, ito yung dapat gawin. This is the right thing to do because we are surrounded by hazards. And secondly, this is what we should do because we are mandated by law. So ito na nga, isa sa mga hugot ng Filipino resiliency, yung part na ng concern natin, yung bagyo, yung baha, yung lindol, yung vulkan, yung landslides. And this is because of our geography. We are located at the western part of the Pacific Ocean kung saan nanggagaling yung mainit na dagat. Pinagmumulan ng mga bagyo natin. Ito yung mapa na nagpapakita ng typhoon belt. So tropical cyclones, we know that is the scientific term to refer to any rotating system of clouds and thunderstorms na matatagpuan sa tropical or subtropical waters. And depende sa region at intensity ng storm, yung tropical cyclones natin ay iba't iba yung pangalan. Kapag nasa Atlantic Ocean ka, ang tawag natin yan hurricanes. Pag nasa North Pacific ka, typhoons, no? Yun yung area natin. Kapag naman nasa Indian Ocean at South Pacific, cyclones naman yung tawag natin. So, gaano ba kalala ang sitwasyon pagdating sa ating mga Pilipino? We are visited by at least 20 typhoons on the average. Yan yung pumapasok sa ating Philippine Area of Responsibility. About 8 or 9 ay nagla-landfall. So, actually, ito yung isa sa mga mapa na ginawa ko dati na nagpapakita ano ba yung mga dinadaanan ng bagyo since the 1800s. Sa mga nakalipas na taon, we have observed na kapag may bagyo, especially recently, laging merong matinding damages. At kapag may bagyo, syempre hindi lang siya malakas na hangin, madalas tubig din. At kapag may bagyo at maraming buhos ng tubig, marami din niyang associated na hazards, kagaya ng landslides, pag-uho ng lupa. And kapag pinag-usapan din yung maraming tubig, syempre, nandiyan din yung pagka-overwhelm ng ating drainage systems. And also, salamat sa geography natin, meron din tayong paggalaw ng lupa at vulkan dahil tayo ay nasa Pacific Ring of Fire. Yun yung unang reason, yun yung tamang gawin, pag-usapan natin siya. And secondly, ito yung dapat natin gawin natin ng SIDRA kasi we are mandated by existing laws. Ito yung dalawang batas na nagre-require sa atin na mag-conduct ng climate and disaster risk assessment. At these laws also mandate us to mainstream SIDRA sa ating mga local plans. At syempre, mention din natin yung People's Survival Fund. So pwede natin actually i-memorize itong tatlong batas na ito na lumalabas din ito sa board exam natin. At as I've said, mini-mainstream din siya sa ating mga CLUPs at sa ating CDP na pag tinawag nating CDP Plus, integrated na yung DRR at climate change adaptation diyan. So pag sinabing SIDRA, pwede natin siyang i-categorize into two general parts. Pag-usapan natin yung anything climate and anything disaster. Unahin natin si climate risk assessment. So ito yung lahat ng steps na pwede nating ma-encounter sa pag-develop ng analysis for SIDRA. And kinolor code ko na rin dito yung mga steps kung saan siya papasok. Pero pwede natin siyang i-summarize according to the sequence. So we have 5 or 6 steps na depende sa references na gagamitin natin. Step 1 would be collection of data. We just collect and organize data related to climate change and hazards. Step 2 would be to scope. We want to determine ano yung impacts ng hazards. The steps 3, 4, and 5, yan yung medyo madugong part ng SIDRA where we collect everything, yung weaknesses and strengths ng ating mga elements at risk. And step 6 would be to just summarize everything. So unahin natin yung climate change. Pag sinabing climate change, pag-uusapan natin din yung projection. So magsisimula tayo sa projection data. Pag sinabing projection, para siyang forecast. Basically, in question lang dyan, ano ba yung magiging weather or ano ba yung magiging panahon sa ating lugar in the future? So since 2011, nagre-release na yung pag-asa natin ng information kung paano maapektuhan ng climate change yung mga LGUs natin. Ano ba yung dapat i-expect sa temperature? Ano ba yung dapat i-expect sa rainfall? At paano tayo dapat mag-prepare? So pag sinabing climate, dalawa lang yung pwede natin pag-usapan dyan. At least, no? We have temperature and we have rainfall. So pag sinabing climate change, temperature change at rainfall change. Ikatlo, yung extreme weather events. So to keep it simple, lahat ng climate projection information na pinapublish ng pag-asa since 2011, ito yung tatlong information na makukuha natin. So bakit meron tayong apat na issues? We have 2011, 2018, 2020, tsaka 2024. Sumasabay lang din yung pag-asa sa updates ng IPCC o yung Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change at sa advancement ng technology na available at the time. So noong 2018, nakafocus yung projections, yung climate projections sa greenhouse gas emissions. So yung numbers na makikita ninyo dito, yung 2.6 to 4.5, 7.0 at 8.5, yan yung tinatawag na radiative forcing. Or pag sinabing radiative forcing, yun yung parang kapag mayroong init na galing sa araw, pag sinabing radiative forcing, yun yung difference between the energy received from the sun and the energy that is released back into the space. So ibig sabihin, makikita natin na kapag positive yung radiative forcing, umiinit yung mundo. Pag sinabi namang negative radiative forcing, lumalamig yung mundo. Ibig sabihin, mas maraming energy na nakakalabas sa space. Kung mapapansin natin dito, positive yung 2.6, positive yung 4.5, and 7 and 8.5. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga scenarios na tinitingnan ng RCP models. Kapag mababa lang yung greenhouse gas emissions, kapag very low, 2.6 lang daw yung watts per square meter na radiative forcing. So, noong 2024, released just this year, ang focus naman dito yung tinatawag na Shared Socioeconomic Pathways or SSP na yung tawag natin sa mga climate models natin. Hindi na lang siya solely nakafocus sa greenhouse gas emissions. Ang focus na ng SSP ay paano makaka-apekto yung human choices at yung mga development paths natin sa greenhouse gas emissions natin. At kasama na rin dyan yung ability natin to respond to climate change. So mas komplikado na siya, but basically, in comparison, ito yung ating mga models na ginagamit through time. Kung titingnan natin yung graph, kung ano ba yung challenges for adaptation at challenges for mitigation, basically, ang tinitingnan lang dito ay pag sinabing SSP1, ito yung best case scenario natin. Halimbawa, nag-transition na tayo sa renewable energy, biglang na lang natin itinigil yung greenhouse gas emissions natin, yun yung SSP1 natin. So, super ambitious siya. Pero pag sinabi namin nating SS5, yun yung tinatawag na business as usual. Kumbaga wala tayong babaguhin, mas pinipili natin na ituloy lang kung ano man yung ginagawa natin ngayon. Pinipili natin mag-adapt na lang, wala tayong babaguhin. So kung meron tayong ganitong scenarios, SSP1, SSP2 hanggang SSP5, paano naman siya magta-translate into climate projections or in terms of temperature changes? Ang questions natin dyan, tataas ba yung temperature in the future? Bababa ba yung temperature in the future? Dadami ba yung ulan? And so on. Ganon. Pero para nating ma-predict yung future natin, dapat nating makita yung patterns in the past. No? Kailangan nating makita yung 30-year record natin. So over the years, lagi nag-a-adjust yung baseline natin for temperature measurements. Pinapag-aralan natin yung trends sa existing data. And for the 2024 projection data ng Pag-asa, yung existing data or observation natin ay tinatawag natin na clean grid pH. Dito nang gagaling yung ating 30-year average data from 1991 to 2020. Kung i-graph natin yung ating 30-year average, we can have this concept of the normal temperature. Kumbaga dito lang dapat maglalaro yung ating temperature. And if you look closely, meron yung ups and downs, meron din siyang general trend. Kapag tinignan natin yung overall long-term average niya, akyat baba, pero pataas pa rin in the long run. We can use this data to predict what the future holds or what the future looks like for us in the next 30 years, in the next 50 years, or in the next 100 years. Itong orange graph kanina, ito yung clean grid pH, yung baseline niya ay 1991 to 2020. Yung color green naman, yan yung ating historical values na model. Given all this, we can have a concept of normal no, or usual temperature. Kaya nga, meron tayong anomaly. Yan yung difference between the actual temperature and the average temperature. This will tell you kung iinit ba yung future or hindi. So ito yung temperature projections in the future given the best case scenario. So dito ngayon papasok yung iba't ibang scenarios natin. In short, kapag positive yung anomaly, hotter than normal. Kapag negative naman, cooler than normal. So ito yung ating future. Ito yung future na naghihintay sa atin. Kung meron tayong drastic changes na gagawin sa ating lifestyle, sa decisions ng government natin, yun yung SSP1 natin. So the best case scenario still gives us a very positive increase in temperature. And worse kapag SSP5, yung ating business as usual. Meron tayong observed changes. So meron din tayong projected changes in temperature sa 2021 to 2050. And ganun din sa rainfall, meron tayong actual data, kung tutuusin, meron tayong actual data, at meron tayong projected changes in rainfall. If you're wondering saan ko nakuha yung mga information na yan, punta lang kayo sa Pag-asa. Dito, I will demonstrate kung paano ko nakuha yung mga data. So merong tinatawag na CRIRAM tool yung Pag-asa. Una nilang introduce noong 2018. Basically, nagsasummarize sila ng projected changes in rainfall, projected changes in temperature, para matulungan tayong mga users na ma-integrate yung ating mga climate projection sa mga local plans natin, kagaya ng CLUP, ng CDP, LCCAP, BRRM plan natin. So kapag na-download niyo yan, PNG files yung nada-download ko, wala akong nada-download na Excel files or any other file format, you will be given image file. So makikita natin dito yung anomaly na nakalagay sa parenthesis. It's higher or lower than the average. So ang color code dito, gusto lang naman natin malaman kung mag-i-increase ba. This example, by the way, is in Binyan, Laguna. Makikita natin na generally mag-i-increase, just a matter of how much. Pag sa rainfall naman, it's a bit dynamic, but we have an idea of when it is going to be dry. So yung mga brown colored cells, wala halos ulan. Yung mga green colored cells, yun yung we would be expecting more rainfall. When we talk about Sidra, ginagamit natin mga information na to, and we will try to analyze the potential impacts on all ecosystems, on us, on our livelihood, and ano ba yung mga dapat gawin para nag-increase yung temperature, para nag-increase yung rainfall. Gagawin din natin sa rainfall. Paano naman kung mag-decrease yung rainfall? We are just trying to document lahat ng mga possible na pwedeng i-expect kung tumaas yung rainfall. So yun yung climate change projection. No, yun lang yung kinukuha natin. And when we talk about hazard data, dito na papasok yung landslide and flooding data from the Mines and Geosciences Bureau. Kaya familiar kayo sa mga landslide hazard maps, flooding hazard maps. So this is an example in Binyan. They are currently formulating their SIDRA, updating their SIDRA and CDP. And this is an example of a landslide hazard map. So when we have the data on climate projection, when we have the data on hazards, we now want to identify yung potential impacts. So the main question here is, ano-ano kaya yung mga changes na mangyayari sa isang locality based doon sa na-download natin sa Pag-asa website? Iinit ba 30 years from now? By how much? Dadami ba yung ulan? By how much? Magkakaroon ba ng tagtuyot? Yun yung sasagutin natin tanong. Anong mga pwedeng mangyari? So paano natin ito ginagawa? Una, we have the climate stimulus, which basically is the temperature and rainfall. So kung ano man yan, tataas ba yung temperatura, ano yung direct impact, ano yung secondary impact. It's basically a brainstorming of ideas. It's basically an attempt to make a parang snowball effect ng mga pwedeng mangyari by increasing the temperature. So ginagawa natin itong tinatawag na climate impact change sa temperature at sa rainfall. Tinatry na natin mag-develop ng tinatawag na impact chain. So one thing leading to another. Gagawin natin siya sa forest, sa agricultural sector, sa urban ecosystem, and sa coastal ecosystem. Kung tataas ang temperatura, gagawin natin siya sa lahat ng sectors. Kapag bumaba naman yung temperature, gagawin din natin yung impact chain sa lahat ng sectors. So ganoon din sa rainfall. Kapag tumaas yung rainfall, gagawin natin yung impact chain sa lahat ng ecosystem. Kapag bumaba naman yung temperature, bumaba naman yung precipitation, gagawin din natin yon sa lahat ng. So ito yung example natin sa agriculture. If you can read what's on the screen, ang example natin for agriculture, tataas daw yung chance ng flooding. Cause and effect. Ginagawa natin yan sa lahat ng ecosystems. After that, dito na tayo diretso sa tinatawag na exposure database. Sa discussion na to, pinagsasama ko na yung climate at saka disaster risk assessment. And for a good reason. So pag pinag-usapan natin yung steps 3, 4, and 5, papasok na dyan yung usapin ng hazard at yung elements at risk. Kasi in reality naman talaga, hindi naman nagmamatter kung pumuputok yung vulkan, wala namang maapekto ang tao, wala namang maapekto ang livelihood, wala namang maapekto ang critical facilities, and so on. So to discuss steps 3, 4, and 5, we need to talk about hazards and we need to talk about elements of risk. So ano ba pag sinabing hazard? Pag sinabing hazard, it could be natural or man-made. Pero it could also be anything It could be an activity, a phenomenon, a condition, or substance that causes loss of life, damage to properties, damage to the environment, disruption of social and economic activities. And it could be natural or human-induced. So ano-ano ba yung examples ng ating natural sa human-induced hazard? So sa natural hazards, we have hydrometeorological hazards or geologic hazards. Sa hydromet, dyan papasok yung ating mga bagyo, yung pagbaha, yung mga storm surge, at yung mga droughts natin. Sa geologic naman, dyan papasok yung ating lindol, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, at yung landslides natin could be rainfall-induced or earthquake-induced. Sa human-induced naman, diyan papasok, actually yung mga giyera, no? Diyan din papasok yung mga industrial accidents natin, yung mga pollution natin. So, to make it simple, no, let's just take two examples of hazard. Very common, madaling maintindihan yung ating landslide hazard at yung ating flooding hazard. We have low landslide, moderate landslide, high susceptibility to landslide, and very high susceptibility. Sa flooding, ganun din. Low flooding susceptibility, moderate flooding susceptibility, and very high flooding susceptibility. So, bakit natin kailangan pag-usapan yung hazard? Kasi as I've said, they cause potential harm to people, to property, and the environment. Kapag sinabi nating hazard, why hazards matter to us, it's because merong people, merong systems, and other elements na subject to potential losses. And ang tawag natin sa mga bagay na pwedeng maapektuhan ng hazard ay mga elements. Kaya natin pag-uusapan dyan yung 5 exposure elements. We have the population element, we have the critical facilities element, we have the urban uses element, we have the resources element, and the lifeline utilities or roads element. No? So roads na lang yung example ko, but there are a lot of other lifeline utilities dito. So just to give you the idea na kapag sinabing hazard, merong at least 5 elements na naapektuhan. Ito yung technical term natin to refer to these elements. We have the exposure elements, no? We have the people, property, infrastructure, and environments that are affected. So you can actually memorize now itong 5 elements na ito. When we actually conduct SIDRA, we will be dealing with these 5 elements now and then. So pag sinabing exposure to landslide, pinag-uusapan dyan na how much of the population are affected by the landslide, how much of the critical facilities are affected by the landslide, and what proportion of the urban uses are affected by the landslide, what proportion of the resources are affected by the landslide. Ganun din sa floods. We are also identifying alin sa mga 5 exposure elements natin yung affected by the flood. Again, exposure, yung tawag natin, if a certain element is affected by different levels of hazard. So, just to give you an example, pag nagmamapa tayo halimbawa, gumagamit tayo ng tinatawag na overlay analysis. So, simulan natin halimbawa sa population. So, we have 5 elements, di ba? We have the population, we have the critical facilities, we have the urban uses, we have the natural resources element, and we have the lifeline element. You get the idea. We start with the barangay boundary, and we overlay the flood map. When you do that, you get the flooding per barangay. No? You identify which barangays are affected by the flood. Just that information. Alin sa mga barangays yung merong flood, alin yung wala. And when you also overlay the households in the barangay, you get the distribution of the households per barangay. Saan mas marami, saan mas konti, saan meron, saan wala. And when you combine yung population map and yung inyong flood susceptibility map, you will come up with a flood exposure, not just the flood exposure map. Ibig sabihin, makikita mo dito, alin yung mga households na tinamaan ng baha. Yun yung concern natin. Alin sa mga households gaano sila karami, and all the other characteristics of those households. That's exposure. Okay? So the question is, kapag ba ang isang element, pag sinabing element, yan yung population, facilities, urban uses, resources, and roads, kapag ba ang element ay merong high exposure to flood, does it automatically translate to high risk? Yun yung question natin. Kapag naman ba yung element, pag sinabing element, again, population, yung limang elements natin sa baba, kapag ba ang element merong high exposure to landslide, does it automatically translate to high risk? Yun yung question natin. And we'll answer that by discussing one of these houses is more sensitive sa flooding and landslide. So let's take another example. Which one is more adaptive to flood? Which one is more adaptive to landslide? So yun yung mga questions natin. And as you can imagine, may mga houses na hindi ganun ka-sensitive, may mga houses din naman na mas adaptive. So you get the idea, gumagamit ako ng dalawang terminologies to have a better analysis of what's going to happen. So meron tayong tinatawag na konsepto ng sensitivity and adaptive capacity. Just because you're exposed to high flood doesn't automatically translate na high risk ka na kagad. Kasi nga, we are all in the same storm, but we are on a different boat. So pag-usapan natin, ano ba itong tinatawag na sensitivity at adaptive capacity? So pag sinabing sensitivity, gaano ba kadaling maapektuhan ng isang element? Pag sinabi namang adaptive capacity, ano yung ability ng isang element to minimize the damages? Ano yung ability niya to recover or to adjust? From here, I want you to remember that all of our 5 elements have both sensitivity and adaptive capacity. So, isa-isahin natin. Kapag sinabing population, yung sensitivity niya could be considered, ano ba yung weaknesses ng isang population? Pag sinabi namang adaptive capacity, ano naman yung strength, yung ability ng isang element to respond to stress. Examples ng mga indicators for sensitivity ay yung mga informal settler families, yung ating mga young dependent, mga old dependents, yung ating mga differently abled, yung mga PWD natin, yung mga people living under the poverty threshold, yung mga malnourished individuals natin, yan yung mga sensitivity indicators natin. Yan yung mga nakaka-apekto doon sa ability natin to respond to stress. Yung adaptive capacity naman, yan yung strengths. Pwede natin siya i-consider na strengths. So sa population, kailangan natin ma-identify ano ba yung sensitivity niya, ano ba yung adaptive capacity niya. Sa urban uses, ganun din. Pag sinabing urban use, ito yung mga commercial, industrial, any non-forest, non-water, or non-agricultural areas natin sa ating land use. So dito, in-identify natin gaano ba karami yung mga luma, gaano karami yung mga structures natin na gawa sa light materials, and gaano karami yung mga dilapidated na buildings natin. Yun yung mga sensitivity natin pagdating sa urban uses. Yun ang mga adaptive capacity natin, yung mga capacity to retrofit, willingness to relocate, yung hazard mitigation standards, and so on and so forth. So sa resources naman, could be agriculture or fisheries. Diyan papasok yung mga sustainable production techniques natin, irrigation. Pagdating naman sa adaptive capacity, anything positive, no? Any government support, mga hazard mitigation measures natin. Sa critical facilities naman, examples ng critical facilities natin, yung mga schools, yung mga hospitals, government buildings, religious institutions natin. So sa critical facilities, tinitingnan din natin ano ba yung mga existing condition niya, ano ba yung materials na ginamit, kailan siya itinayo. And ganun din, sa adaptive capacity, related din siya sa hazard mitigation. Sa lifeline utilities natin, example natin dyan, kalsada. So this is very tedious and a little complicated. Kaya pagdating sa lifeline utilities,
nililimit lang natin sa roads yung ating analysis. But if the LGU has the capacity and time to actually conduct for water resources, siguro mga water lines nila or telecommunication facilities nila. So sa adaptive capacity naman, ito yung ating mga ina-identify. In a nutshell, I would like you to remember na pinag-usapan natin yung mga exposure elements natin, meron silang sensitivity tsaka adaptive capacity. You can add more adaptive capacity indicators, you can add more sensitivity indicators, but if you combine them, you get the idea of vulnerability. So diyan papasok yung konsepto ng vulnerability. So ito ay mga inherent qualities ng isang element. Kapag na-identify na natin yung vulnerability ng isang system, tapos exposure sa hazard, dyan na papasok yung konsepto ng severity of consequence. So slowly, ini-introduce ko kayo dun sa mga technical concepts. Whenever you read about severity of consequence, na-factor in na dyan yung vulnerability. Kapag in-expose mo na yung isang element sa hazard, like landslide or flooding, dun na papasok yung severity of consequence. By now, siguro meron na tayong sagot dito. Kapag ba na-expose sa high flood susceptibility yung isang element, automatically high risk na ba agad? Hindi pa. Kasi consider muna natin yung sensitivity, consider muna natin yung adaptive capacity. In short, consider muna natin yung vulnerability bago natin masabing high risk siya. So, review tayo ng konti. Nagsimula tayo sa hazard, pwedeng landslide or flood. And then we have the 5 exposure elements. We have the population, urban uses, natural resource-based production areas, critical facilities, and lifeline utilities. So, pwede natin i-expose yung elements sa landslide. Pwede natin i-expose yung elements sa flood. Pero hindi pa yan risk kasi kailangan nating maintindihan, kailangan natin ma-identify ano-ano ba yung mga sensitivity tsaka adaptive capacity ng bawat elements na ating ina-analyze. Okay? And doon pa lang papasok yung severity of consequence kapag in-expose na natin yung vulnerability sa hazard. Okay? Pwede natin siyang i-review by looking at the more scientific flowchart. So you have this concept of hazard. Naandyan lang sila. Actually, in-skip ko kanina yung konsepto ng potential impact. Pero naka-tie up siya sa concept ng sensitivity. And by now, you understand what sensitivity means. It depends on the element. Pag sinabing population, yan yung mga informal settler, ito yung mga malnourished, ito yung mga young and old dependents, ito yung ating mga PWD, mga people living under the poverty threshold, yun yung sensitivity. Pagdating naman sa urban use, ito yung mga lumang buildings, ito yung mga dilapidated buildings, ito yung mga buildings made of light material, yun yung example ng sensitivity. Okay? And kung meron kang weakness, meron kang strengths. No? Yun yung adaptive capacity. Pag sinabi na bang adaptive capacity, yan yung mga ways to minimize yung mga impacts ng hazard. Yun yung mga hazard mitigation natin, yun yung mga access to information, yung mga government investments, support from the government, ayan. Yun yung mga pambawi para hindi ganun katindi yung effect sa atin ng isang hazard. Pag pinangbangga natin yung hazard sa vulnerability, papasok, as I've said, yung severity of consequence. Meron na tayong mas realistic na measure kung gaano ba talaga kadala. Lastly, meron din palang effect kung gaano kadalas mangyari ang isang hazard. So, ibig sabihin, kapag na-identify yung iyong area as high flood hazard, kailangan din nating malaman gaano ba kadalas mangyari yung isang hazard. Is it yearly? Is it every 50 years? Is it every 100 years? Doon natin ma-identify yung totoong risk. So, yun yung actually yung nilalaman ng exposure database natin. Inaalam natin ano ba yung mga elements na maapektuhan. Ano ba yung sensitivity, adaptive capacity ng mga elements. Okay? Pwede na tayo mag-proceed sa climate assessment, disaster assessment. So, napag-usapan na natin yung hazard, at elements at risk. So sa hazard, usually makukuha natin yan no, sa Mines and Geosciences Bureau. Meron tayong mga publicly accessible na hazard maps at flood hazard maps. Okay, sa elements at risk naman, so the question is, saan natin pwedeng makuha yung ganito klaseng data? Yung population natin, pwedeng manggagaling sa CBMS kasi naka-plot sila, longitude, latitude, yung mga actual location sila. Or in the absence of CBMS, ang pwede natin gamitin dyan ay yung residential areas from the existing land use map. Yung part na to madali lang, pwede natin i-plot yung mga households. But what about sensitivity and adaptive capacity? Yun yung pinakamalaking bulk. Kaya nga, papasok dito yung tinatawag na additional required information. So aside from the location of the houses, aside from the location of the residential areas, we need to get this data from the local government. And in the case of Binyan, ito yung mga ilan sa mga offices na pwede nilang hingaan ng tulong. This could be more, no? Depende sa kung saan ninyo pwede makuha yung literacy rate, educational attainment, employment, PWD. So pagdating naman sa urban use, check natin yung existing land use nila. Alin dyan yung mga non-water, non-forest, non-agri. It could be the commercial, industrial, tourism, cemeteries nila. So ito, madali lang din ito kung tutuusin. Pwede nating identify yung mga areas na to sa isang land use. Ito yung medyo mahirap na part. Kailangan nating malaman, okay, sa lahat ng buildings na na-identify, sa lahat ng mga urban users na na-identify, alin dyan yung merong coverage to infrastructure mitigating measures, alin dyan yung merong insurance, alin dyan yung merong capacity or willingness to retrofit or relocate. Basically, mga yes or no lang naman karamihan dito. Pero yung simple yes or no can actually make a big effect doon sa risk level ng isang element. No? In this case, yung urban use element natin. We need to also know gaano kadami yung mga lumang buildings. Alin sa mga buildings yung made out of light materials. Ito yung mga sensitivity saka adaptive capacity ng urban use areas natin. Question is, saan sila makukuha? Pwede siya makuha sa CPDO, sa City Engineering Office, and somewhere else, no, kung saan pa sa tingin nila ay makukuha yung information na ito. Third would be the NRBPA, or yung Natural Resource-Based Production Areas. It could be crop, fisheries, or forest-related. Kung meron silang mapa ng mga SAP-BC, Strategic Agriculture and Fisheries Development Zone, relatively easy na makakuha ng mga areas ng agriculture, fisheries. But again, yung additional information, yung medyo challenging na part. We need to know ano yung mga crop types na nakatanim, ano yung production per area, yung replacement cost, at yung mga dependent farmers. As you can imagine, ito yung mga information na pwede nating i-declare kapag tinamaan tayo ng calamity. So kapag meron tayong ganitong klaseng information sa local government, mas realistic yung figures na mapoprovide natin. So yung fourth na element natin, yung critical point facilities. Ang example nito ay yung rural health units natin, yung mga schools, yung mga hospitals, LGU buildings, and so on. So madali lang din naman yan tutusin. Pwede natin i-plot yung mga point, pero yung additional information yung medyo challenging. Yung condition ng building, kailan siya itinayo, and so on. Maraming offices tayong pwedeng pagtanungan kung saan makukuha yung mga information na yan. And lastly, yung lifeline. So like I've said, it could be transportation, water distribution, power distribution. Pero in practice, ang ating ina-analyze lang dito ay roads. Kasi medyo komplikado yung pag-determine ng risk for the lifeline utilities. Kung road man yung pipiliin natin, kailangan natin magkaroon ng information about the road classification. Siya ba ay national road, provincial road, barangay road, municipal road? Ano yung surface type? Siya ba ay gawa sa gravel and sand? Siya ba ay gawa sa concrete, asphalt, cement? nagmamatter din yung mga information na yon. Kasi kapag binaha yung isang kalsada, iba-iba pa ng response yung iba't ibang surface type. Yung third, road condition. Kailangan natin malaman siya by poor, in good condition, and all the other information na makukuha natin mostly sa engineering office. So yan yung ating 5 exposure elements. Again, meron tayong mga data na kailangan na mostly in the form of GIS data. No? We have the shape files. We have the point shape file, the polygon shape file. And for every element, meron tayong mga tinatawag na attributes. No? Yung mga additional information natin. Attributes which translate to sensitivity and adaptive capacity. Kailangan natin malaman lahat yun. So ano ba itong severity of consequence na to? Like I've said, kapag pag pinagbangga natin yung exposure to flood, exposure to landslide, at yung vulnerability. At pwede nating ma-measure yung severity of consequence into low, moderate, high, or very high. So ang isang element could have low severity of consequence or very high severity of consequence na binibigyan natin yung score na 1, 2, 3, 4. I would also like to emphasize yung likelihood of occurrence. So hindi porket na-identify yung isang area mo na mataas yung susceptibility to landslide, kailangan din nating malaman gaano ba siya kadalas mangyari. So this is just an estimated period of time expressed in years that a hazard is likely to repeat itself. So meron kang high score of 6 for frequent and 1 for very rare. So kung meron ka ng exposure database, pwede mo actually paglaruan itong numbers na ito and you will see for yourself kung gaano kalaki yung magiging effect niya sa overall risk score. So, pag pinagsama natin yung likelihood of occurrence at severity of consequence, again, the severity of consequence ay hazard times plus vulnerability. You. So, pag pinagsama natin yan, we will get this information. Basically, yung mga matataas na scores could translate to high-risk areas, yung mga red, at yung mga low-risk areas. So, as you can imagine, hindi tayo basta-basta nag-assign ng risk score just because. Kino-consider din muna natin yung severity of consequence at likelihood of occurrence. Based sa updates no, sa methods, yung likelihood of occurrence natin ay 4 na levels na lang. Depende sa improvement sa methods na binibigay ng ating mga national government agencies na mandated to really make studies tungkol sa mga bagay na ito. So we now have 4 levels sa likelihood. We have likely with a score of 4 and rare with a score of 1. By the way, pag sinabing likelihood of occurrence, pag sinabing likely, nangyari na siya ng maraming beses, at least sa lifetime natin. Pag sinabi namang possible with a score of 3, pwede siyang mangyari isang beses sa ating lifetime. Pag sinabi namang unlikely, maybe nangyayari siya somewhere from time to time. Pwede niyo itong paglaruan, itong score na to later. Kasi yung ating SIDRA database ay naka-Excel. So, pwede tayo mag-assign ng score sa mga information na ito. So, pag pinagsama natin yung severity of consequence tsaka yung likelihood of occurrence na yan, we'll get these numbers no? Na magta-translate sa risk. Pag sinabing very high risk, ito yung mga areas na may ganitong score. Kaya natin pinagsama yung steps 3, 4, and 5 kasi sa ating existing methods, meron tayong ginagamit na Excel file na naka-formula na lahat. At the same time, so pag sinabing disaster risk assessment, kino-consider natin yung likelihood of occurrence, yung severity of consequence, and yung risk score. And by now, I am confident na medyo familiar na kayo sa severity of consequence. Pinagsama na dyan yung vulnerability. So pag pinagsama yung likelihood tsaka severity, yan yung risk natin. Kaya meron tayong ganito. So kapag nakakita na kayo ng risk map, So, maaaring ganito na yung nangyari, no? Halimbawa, may flood data ka, may population element ka. So, population is just one of the 5 elements. So, pag pinagbangga mo sila, you have the flood exposure. So, exposure pa lang yan, hindi pa yan risk. So, kapag naman kinactor in natin yung sensitivity, adaptive capacity, yung vulnerability, yung severity, and likelihood of occurrence, dyan pa lang papasok yung risk map, no? Dyan pa lang papasok yung risk. So, sa risk, kung titingnan niyo yung mapa, color-coded na yung mga houses natin ng red, color-coded na siya ng purple, color-coded na siya ng yellow, no? So dito niyo makikita na hindi automatically na nagta-translate to risk kapag tinamaan ka ng high susceptibility to flood. After ng lahat, no, pagkatapos ng lahat, sa-summarize na natin yung ating mga na-discover, no? Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na decision areas. Ibig sabihin, may mga elements na although tinamaan ng high flood or high landslide, doesn't automatically mean na nasa priority sila. Ang dami natin kinonsider, no? So, isa-summarize natin siya into a table that will look like this. So, halimbawa, sa isang barangay, sabi natin barangay poblasyon, na-identify natin merong informal settler families malapit sa isang dagat. Hazards natin ay flooding, sea level rise. So, yung mga impacts niyan, of course, and yung mga policy intervention, karamihan naman alam na natin. But dito, na-identify natin specifically ano yung barangay. Na-identify natin very specifically ano yung hazard na meron sa barangay na yon at ano yung mga pwede nating gawin. So, pagdating naman sa land use plans, again, ito yung ating mga enabling policy environment natin. At least 2 plans yung ating pinag-a-applyan, yung CLUP at CDP. Kung meron tayong 12-step process sa CLUP, so review siguro sa inyo to, maybe some of you are already familiar with the 12-step process. Steps 3 and 4 ay iterative, no? Pwede kang bumalik sa vision, pwede i-analyze yung situation. After analyzing the situation, you can refine your vision for the city or municipality. And then you proceed with the land use planning, zoning ordinance, and all the way to monitoring. Yung SIDRA would likely fall into the analysis of the situation. Kasi pag ina-analyze mo yung situation, dun mo na makikita yung mga areas na affected ng hazard. And that will affect how you strategize yung iba't ibang mga land uses and where to build, where not to build. Ganon. Again, we have at least 5 or 6 steps, no, sa ating SIDRA. Una, nagko-collect tayo ng information sa climate change and hazards. Secondly, we analyze, we identify the impacts of those hazards, exposure database, vulnerability assessment, and disaster risk assessment. And lastly, yung ating summary, no. We can also argue na maraming entry points yung SIDRA natin. Sa step 1 pa lang, pwede na natin actually isama yung SIDRA Financial Work Plan. Financial and Work Plan. Pwede na rin natin i-identify sino ba yung mga tao na pwede natin i-involve dito sa ating SIDRA. Sa step 2, pwede natin i-identify yung mga stakeholders and mga representatives na pwede mag-participate or mag-assist sa atin. Pwede yung mga taga-barangay, pwede yung mga NGAs, pwede yung mga NGOs. Pagdating naman sa step 3, pwede natin actually i-incorporate yung mga keywords na may kinalaman sa disaster o keyword na may kinalaman sa climate doon sa mismong vision natin. Success indicators kung tawagin. Sa pag-analyze ng situation, natapos na natin yung SIDRA dito halimbawa, pwede na tayong mag-adjust ng land demand natin, pwede na natin i-adjust yung land supply and suitability natin based on climate change and hazards. Pwede na natin ma-prioritize yung mga decision areas natin. And so on. So maraming entry points kaya siya tinatawag na risk-informed planning. So halimbawa, meron tayong current and future needs, pwede na natin i-incorporate yung findings natin sa SIDRA. No? Halimbawa, meron tayong education sector, pwede nating as simple as identifying ano-ano ba yung mga hazards na meron for every elementary school. So ganun lang siya kasimple, no? Ano yung mga hazards na pwedeng maka-apekto sa kanila. Pwede na natin itong i-share, no, sa mga constituents natin. For barangay naman, barangay level, pwede na nating ma-identify gaano kalaki yung area na affected ng isang particular na hazard. Diba, meron kang flood hazard, no? How much of every barangay is affected by different levels, no? So dito pa lang, pwede mo nang, if you're really prioritizing, pwede mo actually i-rank, no, yung iyong mga decision areas. So pagdating naman halimbawa sa landslide, pwede mo rin agad ma-identify gaano kalaki yung affected by a certain level of landslide hazard, no? And how much of that barangay is exposed. This kind of information can help you decide to prioritize. So, meron din, halimbawa, for every element, pwede mo actually bilangin yung actual number of affected individuals. Halimbawa, for population, you can make a summary of the exposure analysis at ma-identify natin yung tinatawag na threshold level. So kung titingnan natin yung guidebook, existing na si LUP guidebooks natin, meron actually siyang sineset doon na limits per element. So gaano karami yung affected population, how much of the urban uses are severely damaged, or ilang residential, ilang other urban areas are affected, how much of the agricultural crops are affected in terms of percent. Pagdating naman sa critical facilities at lifeline utilities, binibilang natin dyan yung araw at linggo kung kailan na-disrupt, no, yung services. So pwede natin siyang iset as acceptable kung less than 5% ng population na affected. Ganun din sa urban areas natin, less than 5% ng residential, less than 10% ng urban areas. So kapag naman sa disruption of services, pag less than 1 day sa facilities or less than 1 day for cities and municipalities sa lifeline utilities. So ito ay makikita natin, no, sa guidebook natin na existing. Nag-set sila ng mga threshold levels kung kailan natin masasabi na tolerable yung disaster per exposure element. So this is actually nakikita sa page 185 ng supplemental guidebook natin, no? Yung mga information na to ay publicly available naman. So for our example, exposure of population by barangay, and upon ranking ng mga barangays, pwede na natin ulit hugutin yung information from our database table. So ano ba yung mga information na pwede natin makuha sa ating database table? For instance, meron tayong barangay na ang pangalan ay Balala. So number 1 siya na priority because of high risk and high susceptibility to flooding. We need to know ano ba yung mga sensitivity information na nag-contribute kung bakit siya natin number 1 priority. Ano ba yung mga adaptive capacity measures na meron sila, meron ba o wala. So, sabi dito sa database table na example natin, 28% ng population ay exposed sa flood. 42% doon ay informal settlers. So, yun pala yung reasons, no, kung bakit tumaas yung kanyang ranking doon sa priority decision area. Very few lang yung merong access to financial assistance, and kakaunti rin, 15% lang yung merong access to information. So, kapag pinag-combine natin itong mga to, ito yung mga reasons, no, kung bakit mataas yung risk ng barangay na ito. So, itong mga information na to, kapag na-develop na ninyo yung exposure database, huhugutin na lang ninyo siya, magkakaroon na kayo ng technical finding. Sa second barangay naman natin, ganun din. Bakit siya number 2? Kasi meron siyang high susceptibility to flooding, but it doesn't stop there kasi we need to know ano ba yung characteristic ng kanyang exposed element. So in the case of population element, 20% daw ay exposed sa flood and 75% ay living below the poverty threshold. So nag-contribute ng malaki yung sensitivity indicator na poverty. And in terms of light materials naman, 63%. So more than half ng population ay nakatira lang sa mga light materials. 34% naman ay mga informal settlers. So meron ding issue ng ISF. Pag pinag-usapan yung informal settler, and when we talk about land use planning, we need to allocate spaces for these
people. Kaya nga meron tayong mga socialized housing, mga ganong klaseng allocation sa ating land use plans. And why is it number 2 sa priority natin is because kukunti lang din yung may access sa financial assistance. It has very low government investment to mitigate. So lahat ito nakukuha natin doon sa ating exposure database. Our third priority would be we have 91% dito sa barangay na to, informal settlers. So dito pala makikita mo na it maybe has a huge impact on sa kanyang sensitivity. Tapos 71% ano din light materials. Very, very few, just 4% lang yung merong capacity to retrofit or willingness to relocate. Lahat sila gusto magstay doon sa lugar na yon, no, regardless of the high susceptibility. I think you get the idea, no, na when you have information about the sensitivity, if you have the information about the adaptive capacity, and you have the vulnerability, you can get the risk score. Of course, factoring in then the likelihood of occurrence, saka yung severity of consequence. Pero after getting information about the risk, you can go back to the exposure database and identify ano ba yung characteristic ng mga yun. Bakit sila high risk? Dito, as compared doon sa naunang tatlo, medyo mataas yung access to information ng barangay na ito. But then again, 95% ay living under the poverty threshold. So that's one of the sensitivity indicators natin, di ba? And of course, we have the 70% na isa din sa mga sensitivity indicators natin sa urban use areas. To jog your memory, we have sensitivity indicators, we have adaptive capacity indicators na nanggaling sa ating exposure database nila. And then, we can come up with this kinds of analysis na ito yung mga major sensitivity indicators that affect the risk. From here, you can actually have the proposed interventions. Doon nanggagaling yung mga proposed interventions natin. So, hindi natin basta-basta sinasabi na, uy, mag-relocate ka tayo ng informal settlers. We are getting this from data. You can actually have, for instance, in last line dito, you can have additional 9.29 hectares of residential areas for informal settlers. So now this will now affect yung ating land use planning later on. Meron lang naman tayo at least 4 na options pagdating sa risk management. Una, pwede natin sigurong consider kung kayang tanggalin yung risk. So how do we do that? Wag na nating i-locate yung isang development sa area na may high risk, no? Kumbaga, we avoid the area altogether. Or we can mitigate, we can reduce the frequency of occurrence maybe or the severity of the consequence. Or maybe we can have apply for insurance, no? Yung we shift, no, the responsibility to another party. Lastly, we can just do nothing, no? Just hayaan na lang natin, resilient naman tayo. We can always invoke Filipino resiliency. Yan yung orange, no? So pagdating naman sa mga land use plans natin, ito yung isa sa mga ways in which we can integrate yung mga findings natin sa ating CLUP document. Maraming mga sectors, subsectors dyan sa ating CLUP document. So we can lift the information from the SIDRA to reflect doon sa ating land use planning document. Marami ding entry points kung saan natin pwedeng i-mainstream yung specific findings natin sa SIDRA pagdating sa land use planning. Una, we have yung exposure information natin, pwede natin siyang agad i-mention sa development constraints. So ano ba yung mga pumipigil sa LGU na umunlad? Pwede natin sabihin na kasi malapit siya sa fault line, so hindi natin masyadong basta i-promote yung high-rise buildings dyan. O kaya pwede natin sabihin na kasi ano yan, regularly binabaha, kaya hindi tayo pwede magtayo ng mga infrastructure dyan. So yung mga development constraints, and we can get those kinds of information dito pa lang sa SIDRA. The structure plan, yan, pwede na natin actually broadly ma-identify saan bawal, saan hindi dapat, saan pwede. And I think yung pinaka-favorite ko dito ay yung land supply analysis because we can actually include the hazards sa overlay analysis pa lang natin. And actually, I can share with you yung ginawa ng BISUD Regional Office 4 sa Cuenca, Batangas. Ito yung land supply analysis sa Cuenca, Batangas. And what you see on your screen is the map of the municipality. Dito rin, by the way, nasa upper portion yung tinatawag na Mount Bacolod. Mount Bacolod yan. And would it surprise you to know na the entire Cuenca is alienable and disposable? So that's the situation. And for the succeeding slides, lahat ng color yellow are areas where we can build houses and other urban land uses. So the thing is, no, even though the entire municipality is alienable and disposable, there will be other considerations. There will be legal and physical constraints, no? Or we can call them development constraints. Yung mga factors na dapat mag-limit or makaka-apekto sa land development. It could be physical, could be environment, pwede siyang steep slopes, no? 50% slope and above, or mga flood-prone areas, or pwedeng mga protected areas or other wildlife areas. So as I've said, we can treat all the yellow colored areas as buildable. So meron tayong tinatawag na land supply or yung area na available for urban expansion. So the entire municipality is yellow for now, but we can apply other development constraints now. So although it is unfortunate that Mount Makulot is alienable and disposable, it is also lucky that the large portion of the municipality is covered by the protected landscape or the PVPL. So since this is a protected area, we automatically exclude this in the supply areas for development. Now, there will be presence of houses within this boundary. We cannot do anything about them. But for the proposed land use, we designate the area as off limits. So, dapat no man's land siya for future development. So, exclude natin siya sa buildable areas. So, this is now our remaining areas for development. Can we just build anywhere within this area? We will explore other physical constraints like yung hazards, no? So, this is what we found out sa Sidra natin. There will be natural hazards. And what you see on your screen is where Sidra hazard maps come in, no? We don't include areas with high flooding, landslide hazards. We don't include these areas now for obvious reasons. So we exclude high flood, high landslide. And so we are left with this map. Now, since we are identifying areas for residential and other urban uses such as commercial, industrial, etc., we could also identify steep slope areas or depende sa decision ng planner, no? Halimbawa, kung 30% slope and above, so ito yung mga steep slopes na na-identify namin. Karamihan pumapasok na doon sa TVPL, doon sa upper left portion. Pag in-exclude natin yan, ito na lang yung matitira. So most of the slopes of 50% and above are within the Taal Volcano Protected Landscape. So para siyang para siyang elimination. Aside from hindi tayo pwede magtayo ng bahay sa tubig, meron din tayong policies protecting the river banks. Dapat, sabi sa water code, dapat meron tayong easements or buffer areas sa mga river banks natin, sa lake shores, depende kung nasaan yung ilog. So kapag nasa gubat daw yung ilog, dapat meron kang 40 meters na buffer zone. 20 meters naman ng easement kapag nasa agriculture area ng ilog at 3 meters naman sa urban areas throughout the entire length of the water body. So bakit hindi siya buildable? Ang allowed uses lang sa easements natin ay public use, no, like recreation, navigation, fishing. Kaya excluded din siya. Okay? So lastly, syempre, kung nag-i-exist na yung build-up areas, hindi na tayo dapat pwede mag-build dyan. Syempre, exist naman na halimbawa yung buildings, existing na yung residential, urban areas, excluded na rin siya sa ating buildable areas. Ito na yung mapa after matanggal yung existing build-up. So, sinare ko lang sa inyo itong process na to kasi process siya ng elimination. There could be more constraints. Depende sa gustong i-include ng planner or depende sa gustong i-include ng technical working group. Okay? So, makaka-apekto siya, no? Pagdating dun sa final computation ng inyong land supply analysis. So, if you have a total land area, exclude natin yung protected areas, exclude natin yung hazards, no? Exclude din natin yung mga steep slope, exclude din natin yung mga river networks, and built-up area. So, ano lang, no? Disclaimer lang, hindi exact yung mathematics dito, but you get the idea na you can actually exclude everything that falls under the constraints, no? So consider din natin yung mga overlaps para walang double counting. And then you are only left with 329, in this case, 329 hectares of buildable areas. And from there, pwede nyo i-compute yung mga areas for reclassification, but it would depend, no, doon sa classification ng isang city or municipality. So I included here yung Memorandum Circular 54, Series of 1993 for everyone's reference. Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is just barely scraping, no, the surface of how Sidra is mainstreamed into the CLUP. As we have explored, Sidra is not just an additional step. It's actually sabi nga, a game changer, especially in light of what we are experiencing right now. These are the kinds of things na we can explore, we can study sa Sidra na pwede nating at dapat nating i-integrate sa ating mga planning process. If we take Sidra seriously, if we do Sidra properly, we can shift from reactive to proactive measures. So again, i-review lang natin yung natutunan natin, no? So pag sinabing Sidra, we talk about climate projections, ano ba yung future natin, iinit ba or dadami yung ulan, and by how much. We also talk about the impacts, no? Ano naman kung tataas yung temperatura, ano naman kung dadami yung ulan. And sa disaster risk naman, inaalam natin yung hazards, could be flood, could be landslide. And ano ba yung mga apektuhan na systems? We have the population, the urban use, the agriculture, or any other resource-based production areas natin. We have the critical facilities, and we have the lifeline utilities. Sa lifeline, usually ang ina-analyze natin dyan, road. Sa exposure database, dyan papasok yung konsepto ng sensitivity, adaptive capacity, vulnerability, severity and consequence, and likelihood of occurrence. Kaya meron tayong hazard map, exposure map, or risk map. Again, we have at least two reasons why we are doing this. Una, we are doing Sidra because ito yung tamang gawin, because we are surrounded by hazards. And secondly, because we are mandated by law. We are also mainstreaming this into our CDP and CLUP and all other plans that we have. CDP has 12 steps. Generally, the Sidra will form part of the analyze the situation, but we also have other entry points sa 12-step process. When we design with the risk in mind, we are not just planning for the present. We are actually building resilience for the future. Sabi nga nila, we cannot stop the hazards from existing, but we have tools, no, like Sidra, to ensure that every decision that we make brings us one step closer to a safer, smarter, and more sustainable cities. So thank you everyone for your time, and the floor is now open for questions.